Russell needs to watch the lateral grid balance. No, 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 that's too much, Russell. We'll have to do it manually. And Russell is going to try starting retro sensor element 32 only. Hello, everybody. That was weird. Welcome to the seventh rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 3, Episode 20, Tin Man, aka The Russell Show, written by Dennis Putman Bailey and David Bischoff, directed by Robert Shearer. This was April 21st, 1990. Where were you? What were you doing, Cirroc? How you doing today?
Doing great. I don't know where I was. Probably in school somewhere. That's my best guess.
Yeah, April 21st is a funny day. It's kind of the recover day. So here's an interesting episode. I personally, I remember this episode when I see this guy's face. I go, oh yeah, I remember this guy. And I remember the ship. I was like, don't they go inside the ship? That's all I really remembered from it. But Cirroc Lofton, aka Jake Sisko of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, what did you think of this episode? And what do you think of seeing a Betazoid?
Yeah, Betazoids don't really have much difference from humans, so it's not like any makeup job, unless there's our contacts that he's wearing.
Yeah, they have
Those
black
are
contact lenses. Yeah, that's it.
okay. So that's pretty much it. So, and those were pronounced at moments during the performance where I was like, whoa, those eyes look kind of creepy right there. They feel like they're piercing through your soul. Um, but right off top, the first thing that jumped out at me was the USS Hood. And I'm all good in the hood. So I wanted to know.
Yeah, Riker comes from the hood. Riker comes
I
straight from the
felt,
hood.
yeah, he's straight
He,
from the hood. And yes, and Captain DeSoto's gave him a shout out. And that was a nice little exchange for me just to open with that because I've heard about the hood and we got to see the hood captain. And,
when you say the hood, you go, I've heard of the hood. You even drag it out a little bit.
I loved it though. That was like a good open for me. Um, and then we get into the story, but for me, the first thing just to hear that was kind of exciting, just to see another captain, the interchange between Picard and Captain DeSoto. There was a nice little kind of lightheartedness between them, and how he kind of threw one joke, kind of soft joke at Will. I like that. Uh,
I wanted to see Worf when Riker's like, "Oh, Captain DeSoto, good to see you again." I worked with him earlier. I wanted to see Worf going, "You are not from the hood. You are not from the hood."
yeah, so like that was the beginning part. So past that point, I was really struggling to figure out what this episode was about. I mean, I understood what it was about when you talk about this alien life ship or form or whatever it was that was discovered way near the star, but it just wasn't flowing well for me as far as the storyline. I think the thing that bothered me the most was, uh, I guess, reading everybody's minds to the degree that he did it was a little bit rude to me. It was like almost like it's like who needs another actor to talk if he's going to just say everything?
Right. Well, I think that was, and I think it's kind of 50-50, is that he was saying that he can't control hearing the thoughts of people constantly over and over again. And he hated hearing it all the time. And so it's almost like he can't help hearing these things and he hates it. But to your point, still, you got to shut the up and let people say it. Even if you know what they're going to say, even if you know, let
Yeah,
them finish their sentence. Let them say it. You don't have to be a know-it-all. You can just have a little
Yeah,
courtesy.
just out of courtesy, you would think that that would be something that he would have developed by now at this age.
Eventually, yeah.
So because somebody would have slapped him by now, and you would have figured that. So I don't know. It was just kind of that took away from my initial introduction into him because it made me have a dislike for the character that I didn't necessarily need to have, because it would have been better if this was a character that I was rooting for or maybe was not understanding in some type of way. But that kind of introduction made me a little bit, it was off-putting. Also, the logistics of hearing everybody's thoughts makes it just difficult for me because I'm thinking, what's the radius on that? How far does that go? This was going from him to this other ship already far away. And then it was going to the Romulan ship that was passing by. So you knew what all the Romulans were thinking. And I'm thinking, well, uh, is that even possible to be able to hear the thoughts of all of those Romulans and dissect one who was in command, the leader that was in command out of a bunch of thoughts? Like if I could hear everybody who's living around me right now and I could hear all of their thoughts, is it
Right.
possible for me to be able to decipher who's in apartment number 3 across the street? I mean, that's like, I don't
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, that happened once before, if I remember correctly, with like a future episode of Next Generation with Data, who said he could hear all these things, but he's a robot. He's an android. He can process things and filter things. How can an organic life form hear it? It's as if you are in a room full of 1,000 people and somebody says, "What's that guy saying in the blue shirt?" And then, unless that guy's speaking more loudly than everybody else, how are you going to decipher it? The question I had about telepathy, and of course, I'm going to nitpick it too, and of course, we're nitpicking something that is, made up in this episode or in this TV series, but like they were talking about proximity as being a factor in telepathy. Like he sensed that Romulan commander when they flew by. He got a little, almost like somebody at the gym walking by and you get a whiff of him. You're like, ugh, right? It's kind of like that. They passed by, he got a whiff of his thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And so that it's proximity. And then when they're saying, wait, how can you hear Tin Man? That's impossible for you. That's too far. First of all, I thought it was well written. Then he says, yeah, maybe impossible for me, but not for Tin Man. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Tin Man reaches him.
Mhm.
Cool. I get that. That's good. That's cool. But then I started thinking about telepathy. Like, is telepathy like sight or hearing to where the further you are, the more it dissipates? I mean, I don't understand the physics of it.
That's
Of
exactly what I'm saying. The distance, the range, like
yeah.
the functionality of that. Right.
Like
Exactly what you're saying.
if you can sense other people's thoughts, there's no physical barrier with that. Like with vision, there's things in the way, like it dissipates, and auditorily. But if you're in space, it's a vacuum. There's nothing in between. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but it seems
Like
weird to me.
I no, I do know what you're talking about, and it makes sense to me. Like it makes sense to me if it's connected with visual. So I'm looking at Riker. I know what you're thinking. I'm looking at you, Picard. I know what you're thinking. But if some dude is 3 decks down in the lower decks, you heard those thoughts too, and you were able to decipher that that was that person over there as opposed to any other person's whose thoughts were. So for me, it's like being able to hear 1,000 different songs at once being played on the radio. And then I ask you, which song did you hear? If you heard
I
a
Will
thousand
Always Love
songs,
You by Whitney Houston. That's the one.
that's all you heard. That's all you
Yeah,
heard.
she belts. Uh,
Yeah, so that's what I mean. It's like it would be hard to decipher all the songs that you hear if you're listening to a bunch of songs all at the same time.
But that's a
That's
really interesting concept is what if it's in conjunction with another sense? Like if you're looking at somebody, or if you're hearing that person speak with your ears, or if you're touching that person, like the Vulcans, they do the mind melt.
mhm.
That feels a little bit more like we'd be able to grasp it. Now, obviously, again, this is some foreign concept that they're kind of making up, but it just, again, I guess we're nitpicking something not too important, but something, those little minor details would help us to connect. I feel like there'd be more storytelling opportunities if they were to connect that telepathy with touch or sight or smell or something like that. That would be really interesting.
Yes, and so there were elements of this episode that I felt like could have been improved upon. Um, I would have liked, for example, had this new character been introduced with some kind of device that he was wearing that helps him deal with this traffic of psychic voices in his head, and so that would have been cool too. Like he had this kind of device that he's wearing, a Geordie like device that's either covers his eyes or a
That's right,
headband type thing,
Xavier. You know what
something
was
that helps him.
what was very telling of the time too, by the way? 1990. By the way, there was a 2 week layoff or 2 week, what do they call it? Vacation, because the previous episode was March 31st. Instead of the next one being April 7th, it was April 21st. So they had some kind of 2 week spring break. But what now I lost myself. What was I talking about? I was just trying to picture spring break in 1990. Oh, that's right. So what told us that it was 1990 to me was when Beverly Crusher said his ESP is high on the charts. I'm like, ESP? I haven't heard that said in 20 or 30 years, right? Remember, ESP used to be the
Yeah,
thing, like, I
yeah.
have ESP. And does anybody say ESP anymore?
Not without the N on the
I
back.
knew that was coming. The way you looked at me, you're like, really? You're gonna leave me with this
that's,
one?
that's an easy one. Extrasensory perception, I believe, is what it was standing
Network.
for.
Yeah.
But yeah. So then, which leads me to my other point, which is this could have been a mental health episode, which I believe it was, but I don't think it
Interesting.
was.
Yes.
I don't think it was properly laid out as a mental health episode. Troy says, I met him at the University of Beta Z. First of all, Riker has this whole chip on his shoulder about what happened on the Gorshuda disaster or something. Which I was like, give him a different word to pronounce, guys. This is not. It didn't
Yeah, I
flow
played it back
well.
like 3 times to try to understand. It was
Groshuda, Gro, Gro,
hang on.
Groshuda, something like that.
It's the Garushta.
The babushka.
Garushta. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It felt like he was struggling saying it. I was like, come on, give him something easier. But so this whole chip on the shoulder that Riker has, wasn't properly like laid out to me to the level, to the degree that Riker was holding this grudge. Okay, that was a problem for me. The second problem was the Starfleet is using this Elbron guy, Tan Elbrun guy. Uh, what are they just using him as like a psychic device for
Yeah.
Starfleet? Is that what his function is?
Yeah, Tam Elbrun Hubbard was I guess they were sending him over to connect with the Tin Man alien ship that looked like a sunflower seed or a almond,
So
maybe more
he's
like an
like
almond.
so is he part of Starfleet? Is really what is my question, because it felt like he was a civilian that is being essentially used by the government, Starfleet at this point, to conduct this kind of psychic, you know, expedition. And it didn't seem as if he was necessarily representative of Starfleet because he was sent in as a peace negotiator or some kind of first contact officer. But is that a diplomatic thing that he has as far as his status in Starfleet?
Yeah, that's interesting because I'm looking it up right now, and it was like a mission specialist. So,
Right.
so that's like, I mean, I'm sure he's not like fully part of Starfleet because he would have had to go through like Starfleet Academy and this and that. Maybe he did, but they didn't explain that because he sure isn't wearing Starfleet uniform. So
Yeah.
maybe he's an advisor or, an ambassador or something like that that they hire on every once in a while for peace negotiations or for, special missions. Do they go like, we don't have anybody in Starfleet that can do this, but we know this guy who totally screwed up another mission. But let's see if he can fix it by doing well. He could be 1 out of 2. See if that works out.
Yeah. So that doesn't that didn't just like sit well logically with me when I started to like, okay, so is this person maybe a guest liaison, like a special person they bring in, uh, you know, um, like being a guest lecturer at a university, which I know a little bit about right now, but
Yeah, this guy.
it could be like that. So that's fine. But then the other problem I have though is the connotation one of the messing up of the Godushka disaster. That was the first kind of negative strike mark that they made to cancel out his reputation. And the other thing was, it felt like Troy was saying he was a patient that she was either
Yes.
studying or observing at a kind of a mental facility, right? At University of Beta's Edge, she said, but she was basically saying he was born with a defect, or not a defect, but some kind of anomaly amongst people from Betazoid,
hmm Yeah,
where he has this ability.
that was interesting to me, actually. I was like, okay, so what they explain, and again, this just makes me wish that they explored this more in subsequent episodes, and I don't really think that they do. As far as I can remember, these are the total amount of betazoids that they've had. They've had Troy and her mom, Loaxana Troy. They've had this guy, Tam Elbrun Hubbard. They also
Mhm.
had Crewman Suitor, played by Brad Dourif for a couple episodes in Voyager. And they had Ensign Stoddy in the first episode of Voyager, Caretaker. And I can't think of any others. Those five. So one was in like 2 episodes, one was in one. There's this guy, and other than that, it's the Troys. And I think there's also Daddy Troy, but he's human. Anyway, so we don't really get to explore this that much. Everybody in the live chat and in the comments below, let me know who else is Betazoid. This made me want to explore them more because of all the stories they're exploring Trill a lot on Discovery right now. Thought it'd be cool if they were also doing Beta Z. But what was interesting was when they said that he was born with, this different ability that is viewed as a negative, which is most kids, they're born without the telepathic skills or the empathic skills. And then through adolescence or when they become teenagers or whatever, they start to develop it. And that's fine because then they can withstand, how powerful it is or whatever. But the ones that are born with it and don't have it developed, it's even stronger in them and they can't control it. All that kind of stuff really made sense to me. Like I get it. I'm like, okay, that I could see that.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, they don't ever explore that ever again. I thought it would be fun to see that again or hear more about it. Like you said, it could have been a mental health episode. It could have been
Yeah.
just exploring that and really fleshing that story out. And then Tin Man, or whatever it was called, um, it was
Yeah.
called
Yeah. Tin Man.
Gum 2 was the name it was
Oh,
called.
yeah.
Gom 2. I mean, it was two things that were lonely, a person and a ship. And then I guess they both died together, but Picard said, I can only speculate. We can only speculate. So maybe they went off together. Since they were happy together, maybe they went off, fulfilling each other's joyousness. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that they died, or do you think that they said, let's be happy
Uh,
together?
no, I don't think they died. I think that they were happy together once they got together, and that ship had way kind of like some supreme level of technology, able to move them so far away in such a quick moment. And so obviously I thought that it was able to get away from that explosion of the supernova. So that's what happened in my own little head canon. But I would have liked to see this episode be more focused on the mental health aspect. I would have liked, for example, Troy and Dr. Crusher to be spending a lot of this episode trying to understand, how he's handling his trauma from, Garshuda, the Garshuda disaster, how he's handling his trauma from, um, having this telepathic ability and where it's kind of got him in his life. So I think that having those conversations with Troy would have been great. She could have been like, why do you feel this way? And he's like, something's calling me, and I don't know what it is about this Tin Man, this, that, and the other. And it could have been a conversation about him working through his trauma, working through his abilities, trying to turn off some of those voices and hone in on those skills. Um, it would have been a little bit better for me. I felt like I was a little bit lost in this episode, but I did like the scenes between Data and Data is really a good character to bounce off of. So
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
so good. He's so good to bounce
You know,
storylines.
I remember this episode, like I said, very vaguely. I just remember two impressions of it: this guy's face and the ship. And I remember that someone I thought maybe went inside of it, but I didn't remember who. But I don't remember it being one of my favorite episodes. And so I think I had the benefit of thinking, this is going to be a boring episode. And then it was pretty good. Like if you expect it to be bad, but if I was expecting it to follow yesterday's Enterprise, or what was the other really good one we just did recently? Captain's Holiday, at least I think that's a great one. Or The Offspring. These were great episodes. And then we've got this one, like it's a little tougher based on what we just saw. But luckily, I was able to be like, I think this is going to be a boring episode. No, I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was, because I enjoyed parts of it. And I'm going to tell you what those parts were right after the break, everybody. Man, look at this. Wow. Unbelievable. All right, everybody, stick around. We will be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Man, it's a beautiful day in LA, hanging out with my pal Cirroc. What could make it better? I guess only trivioids. And they go a little something like this. The Enterprise is preparing detailed exospheric charts of the Hayashi system. Captain DeSoto wants to be sure Riker isn't getting soft aboard that luxury liner. Tam Elbrun was a patient of Deanna Troy's. Tam Elbrun wants Deanna Troy, or calls Deanna Troy D. I can't get used to that. Tam can't read Data at all, like he's not even there. The Romulans claim all that is in their field of vision, Worf reminds us. Starbase 1, 2, 3 has detected two Dideredex class cruisers on an intercept course. Tam Elbrun, again, calls Riker Billy Boy. Russell needs to watch the lateral grid balance. They'll have to do it manually. Being first at any cost is not always the point. And Russell is going to try starting retro sensor element 32 only.
Wow, that's a tongue mouthful.
Yeah, maybe that didn't make
Mouthful
it
of
better.
tongue.
That was a mouthful of tongue. Cirroc Lofton. Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
We had an O'Brien sighting, by the way, a couple times.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
The first scene he was in, though, he didn't even have any lines. I was like, are you guys really going to do call him that way? You really going to just. But then he came back later on and had like a line or two. Still good to see him.
Yeah. So good to see him. Yeah. So good to see him. By the way, again, shout out to you for pointing this out a long time ago and it ringing true every time I hear it. LaForge is the technobabble master.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. It's actually on the highest level that I've ever seen. The stuff, what he said, recalibrate the intermix regulator. I'm like, what the hell? There's no way you know what you're talking about because he sounds like that mechanic that just tells you,
Yeah.
look, your manifold is your tri-manifold needs a new hydrocephalus rate, and you're like, all right.
That was amazing. I mean, look at me. I'm reading the trivioids and I can't even handle it, and let alone
Yeah,
he's saying these, but he's delivering them in a way that he says, oh, I like my PB&J sandwiches with extra P, but peanut butter.
yeah. Okay. But the guy is amazing. When I'm hearing him, it's just like I don't know. Sometimes I'm feeling like, does he get to cheat and write these words down somewhere? Is he memorizing this stuff? Because and even if he is, even if I read it,
Right.
even if you just had it down, written down on the, it's very difficult. Sometimes you're reading the trivioid sometimes, right? And I mean, just reading it is it's hard to get your mouth
Mhm.
to say these things because it's like a tongue twister when you really don't understand what you're saying.
Right. And humans can eventually, when they look, people are going to say, you just practice the line. Yeah, you practice the line, you practice the line, you practice the line. And eventually you can say it perfectly, backwards and forwards, up and down, left and right without thinking and in your sleep. Fine. Yes. But he also acts it. He acts it and delivers it. Doesn't just say it perfectly and naturally, but he delivers it with all the inflections, with the facial movements. And mind you, he has a huge uh, difficulty in acting or a disability for acting because his eyes are covered, by the way, which is where 90% of what we're emoting is coming from as an actor. And so he's doing this with vocal inflections. He's doing it with a lot of eyebrows. He's doing a lot of this and, unbelievable. What a great job.
And movement. So he's always kind of like moving around as if he's got to walk over here and open that panel. I've got to take this thing. I got to do a reading over here. It's constant. He's not just standing there looking down at one thing, pressing buttons on the display. He's moving around like I got to go over here. We got to do this, and I need to this, and it's constant hitting your mark.
Yeah, that's
So
tougher.
it's tougher, especially with the impairment on the eye for visually, right? I know it obstructs them to some degree or another.
Hmm. But
Um,
that's what makes him gold for writers is that look, technobabble is we don't know what the heck they're talking about most of the time, right? But as an actor, Geordie LaForge, played by LeVar Burton as an actor, if he believes what he's saying, we believe what he's saying. And he's saying it like it's not technobabble. He's saying it like he believes it 100%. It's totally, and so that makes us believe it. We're like, oh, okay, it's the
yeah,
whatever thing that he just said. I get it. Yeah, makes sense to me.
100%. It's great. It's that perfect shop talk where it's just like, hey, he knows he's the mechanic. Trust him. I don't know. Um, but yeah, there was also moments where, like, again, I want to say about Brent Spiner and Beta. He's such the curious kind of character where he bounces very well off of storylines where you get to play like, you know, um, you get to play a lot off of him. He's just perfect for like that blank canvas of like, well, matter of fact, kind of emotionless person. And I think it's a good kind of character to bounce off. I love the way Data was in this episode. He had some lines where he says, it is humanity he is fleeing when referring to Tam Elbrun. I thought that was a great kind of a evaluation of the circumstances. You know, he was trying to get away from all of those voices and having the one kind of symbiotic voice with listening only the one voice with the Tin Man was really what he wanted, right? He wanted to kind of supplement all of those voices was just one voice that was he had this simpatico with. So I thought that was an accurate statement by Data when he says it is humanity he is fleeing. And then my one of my favorite moments or takeaways from the episode again was a Data line. And Data says, you know, the purpose of existence is to care for someone. I think I'm paraphrasing, but he says, is the purpose of existence to care for someone? And that made me think about, yeah, it made me think about one of the great purposes of existence, and that is to care for someone.
That was definitely one of the great lines of this episode, and there were a few good ones. For example, here are a couple. When Tam Elbrun was describing the emotional toll that hearing everybody's feelings or sensing everybody's feelings takes on him, he said it's like a tide that never ebbs. That was really good. Kind of reminds me of a tsunami, I guess. But and then he says right afterwards, he says, I like Data. He's restful. When you're living your life like in this constant deluge of voices and thoughts and feelings and emotions, it's got to be taking a toll on you, right? And then if you could talk to somebody that you don't have that, where you're just like, it's simple, it's easy. You could just literally ask him a question, he'll tell you. You don't get bombarded with it. So that definitely made sense to me. I got that. It made sense and I could understand it. So I liked that one. There were a few good lines. I also, oh man, Picard, when the Romulan says, you're in violation of Romulan space. And Picard, the way he delivered the line was he's like, we're not familiar with the terms of your claim on this sector. We're here engaged in scientific research. Do you wish to participate? Man, I was like, that is some classic Picard right there. Just being like, oh, I don't know. We didn't know about this, but you can help us do some science stuff if you want. Yeah, he must have really enjoyed delivering that line. There are some good things. The other things I liked, and I wanted to get your take on these, there were a lot of cool shots. And they weren't like mind-blowing. They just looked good to me. They were like establishing shots a lot of times, like when Tam Elbrun was in sickbay and there was like him and then Crusher and Troy and Picard in the background. It was because then when he sat up, the camera just did a very subtle little dolly move, right? And then kept all four of them in the shot. And this is like such, director 101 or camera. It's nothing mind-blowing, but it worked. It looked good. And I liked, you watch it, you're like, ooh, that looks nice. And there were a bunch of things like that I really liked. I kept noticing shots. There was a shot of like Geordi and maybe Riker and Data looking down at a screen that he was typing on, but we're the screen looking at the three of them. That was a good shot. There was only one shot that didn't work for me. And that was towards the end when it's like close up on Picard and then it zooms out to the rest of the bridge. And it didn't work for me because if the camera felt like it was wobbling on the way out or it was kind of unstable. And I don't know, maybe that's on purpose, but I don't know. To me, I was just like, that's just weird. I don't know. Did you notice any of the directing or the camera work, the DP work?
Not too much, actually. I was looking down and I didn't write down anything about the shots that I saw. I did see some of the special effects stuff that I felt like were added recently.
I thought
because
so
it looks it looked super clean, like the
Hmm.
Romulan ship.
The
Even
spinneroonie.
yes, and the whole that spinning of the Tin Man and when it exploded and did that little pulse energy, all of those kinds of special effects I thought were good. And added to the believability of everything. What also was kind of a little bit cheesy to me was the music. I wasn't a big fan of the music scoring in this episode, particularly the scene where Picard and uh, Tam were talking about the GOM 2 towards the end. I just didn't like the music. It felt too hokey and just uh, just set the wrong tone for me. Almost too set in comical. So it
Yeah,
wasn't the best for me.
I noticed it at the very end. When the
Yeah.
episode ends and it just has like the regular, Star Trek music that they usually play, Next Generation, but then it had the flavor of that specific episode. And it just kind of was a little weird and disconcerting. I mean, I get why they did it. They're like, here's the theme song of the episode, of the theme jingle or whatever. But it did catch me a little bit where I was like, do I like this or do I not? It was
Yeah, I
weird.
did not. I did not. I did not. But I did like 100% another moment that Data had. One of his great moments too, where he was kind of like talking to Joy, and he says, "Through joining, they turned grief to joy, and sadness and happiness, or something to that effect." And then he says, "But what I did realize is this is where I belong." And I thought that was another like
It's very good.
beautifully well written moment. It's like, oh wow, Data came to realization that he belongs on the Enterprise with his crew, and that's his simpatico. That's where he feels at home and at peace. And
Mhm.
so I thought that was a nice kind of bow for the episode.
Yeah, a lot of the next generation really is the growth of Data. Like him going from feeling more like an android to him feeling more like a human. He
Mhm.
definitely grows, and each little episode like this gives us a little bit of that growth. Now, he's still the same character, but he's come to a new realization of where he belongs, a sense of belonging, which is a very
Yes.
human kind of feeling. Yeah, I thought that was really good as well. And this kind of was a Data episode in a lot of ways. We're starting to get a few Data episodes, if you'll notice, right? We had The Offspring was a good one. There was this one that was a good one. There have been a few lately that kind of lean into Data a little bit more. There was the one where, is it Survivors? The one with the little girl that was like, Data, they kept calling out. No, that was Pen Pals. Was it Pen Pals?
Yeah. Pen pals. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. Um, but I did like that in this episode. I mean, there were a couple things. One was that we got a few more characters. I like it when they're expanding. I don't want it to just always be the same seven people, even though they're great characters and they're my favorite in the whole world and all that. But I like to see O'Brien. I like to see Guinan. I like to see, Dr. Solar that came and went, disappeared, or I forgot the girl's name that was in the two episodes in a row in engineering. And then she disappeared, Ensign Gomez. Yes, Sonia
Yeah.
Gomez. And then she came and went, like I like, and then Wes Crusher was in this, and they're using Wesley Crusher well now. He's not just saving the world all the time; he's just part of the crew. And so I
Yeah.
like, and Russell, we got Russell that way he was barking orders at Russell. I'm like, who is this
Yeah.
Russell guy? But this Russell guy has been an extra in like dozens and dozens of Star Trek episodes as Russell. So we'll be seeing him a lot more of that character. But I don't know if Russell ever gets lines. I think he's just
His name came up way too much. It's like, how many shout outs for Russell in this one episode? Uh, but also, there was a moment there where they mentioned 47. Did you hear that? It's like how many ships were it or something like that? And he says, no, how many people died at the Groshuta disaster or something? And Riker says it was 47 or something. And I was like,
Wow, I
oh, there's
didn't
a
catch
47
that.
moment.
Oh, very good. Damn, I missed that.
Yeah, we got a number 47 sighting on this episode.
I noticed that the shields were down 70%. I'm always listening for shields. That's when they like to sneak it in, or Starbase 47, but I didn't catch the 47 deaths. That's a toughie.
Yeah, I
So
caught it.
the other thing was it brought up the topic of euthanasia, and that's also a pretty nuanced topic. Like this thing is millions of years old. It hasn't seen any one of its kind for millennia. It is presumably the only one left of its kind. Otherwise, it would be able to sense it, telepathically, theoretically. And it is going to this star to die. I don't know why it decided right now, this very second, because stars are blowing up all the time in the universe. But this is what it wants. And then should the Federation just let it say, hey, all right, go for it, do your thing, right? Or should it say, no, we have to save a life at all costs and make it live forever? I don't know. What do you think?
Um, I believe that um, it's the choice of the Tin Man to do whatever it decides its will is going to be at that
Yeah.
point. If it's not harming anybody else, um, that's its own decision. But because the alternative, I think that was being posited by Picard was to go back to the Federation, be examined for study. Maybe we can, find somebody. Maybe we can help you find another version of yourself out there, or analyze you and create one in an artificial environment or something. It seemed like it was like going to sign up for being a science experiment to the
Yeah.
Federation. And that didn't seem like exactly the most humane offer for this particular life form. Like, hey, let us put you in in our zoo, and we'll figure you out.
Yeah. We'll poke and prod. You'll love it.
Yeah, you saw what happened with Odo when he was in these research facilities, by his supposed father. You remember, there was a whole episode about him feeling like this sense of torture and stuff because of the experiments that were done on him. So,
Very true.
um, are we good stewards of life form that are outside of our understanding? I don't know that. So,
Yeah. Plus, that's imposing our beliefs onto other cultures, right? Like, what if in their culture, like, that's what they do? They live forever until they decide they want to die. So we should just let it, die, And then what if Troy's like, yeah, but it only wants to do that because it's depressed. We've got to make it feel better and it won't want it. Man, let it die, right? Like it's been around for 1 million years. Oh, that sounds exhausting. Let it die. Jeez,
well,
it
it
needs a
looks
nap.
like they saved it with this episode. Um, Also, another moment that I really liked was when Geordi says he was talking to the computer, and the computer was like, "Limits exceed the limits," and he's like, "To hell with the limits." And it was just one little moment, but I feel like I could always use that when Geordi just says, "To hell with the limits." That's kind of a motto for life. To hell with the limits.
Yes. And on that note, it is time for the seventh rule home run of the episode. While Cirroc sips on his Voyager documentary, Catherine Janeway coffee mug, everybody please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications. If you're listening in, give us a 5-star review. Wait, give us 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate that. And remember to hop on over to our Patreon page and become a patron for all kinds of fun goodies, support this channel, and be our best pals. You can get all those links in the description box below. And on with the show. Cirroc, who gets the home run of the day? Hmm.
Home run is going to go to Data. Brent Spiner again, another home run for him. He's just able to make just things interesting. This would have been a really terrible episode without. So he was the saving grace for me in this episode. He kept it kind of flavorful and interesting, and yeah,
Yeah, I think I might agree with you on Data. He's going to become we're going to put him in the 4 slot, I think, because he just hits a lot of home runs. So
yeah.
Brent Spiner, great acting. He does always make us like him. The writing is going to do that, but the actor needs to knock it out of the park for it to really work. And he did, and he makes Data likable, and he makes us root for him and understand him and really be happy for the little victories. Just every little victory that he has, every little bit of learning about humanity he has, we root for it and we're happy for him. So Brent Spiner for the home run of the episode. And now we want to say thank you to another bunch of cleanup hitters. That's baseball talk for somebody that hits home runs, basically. Homer Frizzell, he knows. Dr. Anne-Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Titus Mohler, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann, Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Goo, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allyson Leach-Heid, Julie Manisfee, Greg K. Wickstrom, probably surfing somewhere in Hawaii. Shaka. Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, who knows a lot about bugs. Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Tim Baum, Chris Sternett, the wine guy, Christopher D. Marshall, Johanna Yunker, Roy Epen, and of course, Jason Okun, everybody. Stick around. We've got the free-for-all coming up next, and we will be right back on the 7th Rule. Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome back to the 7th Rule. It's time for the free-for-all. Look, Melissa Longo's here.
Hi.
And Jason M. Okun is here. Straight from Milan. Okay. Faith Howell is also here on the bridge of the Enterprise D. And Anil O. Polat is right outside the Enterprise D. Carrie Schwent, a.k.a. Crafty Bear, has Armin Shimmerman, as well as the guy that played the guy, forgot his name already. Tam Elbrun. God, we said that name like 15 times and I still can't remember it. Tam Elbrun. Tam Elbrun. Chuck A is in his cool prune juice and chill shirt. What's up, Chuck? Allyson Leach-Heid is also here wearing her favorite sweatshirt. And
chat pack.
Beautiful, gorgeous. Wow, that does look amazing. And the Dark Lord, Chris McGee, is here surrounded by boxes, all part of his master plan. All right. First things first. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score. Be gentle.
We'll say I'm going to go with a 6.5. 6.5 on this episode.
Interesting. Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know it?
How about 6.2?
6.7.
7.3.
IMDb 7.1. Not exactly what I would give it, but taking your guesses to what the IMDb would have.
Well, Dikembe Mutombo would say, no. It's a 7.2. He is 7'2" as well. Everybody knows Dikembe Mutombo of the Denver Nuggets. Melissa probably knows. Chuck A probably knows.
Not in my house.
That's right. He said it just like that.
That's true. Very good. Very good.
Did we hear any NAMs today? I didn't catch any. What about some kind of or some sort of? No. All right. Cirroc caught a 47, so that should be something we should
Yeah.
monitor. That's pretty good. Melissa Longo, will you please get us started
Yeah.
off on the right track by telling us what you thought of this episode, which is actually the 47th Next Generation episode?
Wow.
Not,
Interesting.
I'm lying.
Every day is April Fool's around here. Well, from the sounds of it, I liked this better than some people did. I like this episode better than some, because I kind of understood where Tam was coming from. The episode was kind of analogous to extroverted introverts, if that makes sense. In that, but it seemed like he didn't mind connecting with people on a personal level, but the number of voices in his head was just too much. And as an introvert, I can get that, where if you have too many people in your face and too much going on and too many people around and too many voices around, it gets a little maddening and energy draining. So that I definitely got that. And I'm a sucker for space aliens, animals of all kinds me to offend. But yes, because I like animals in general, whether they're from this planet or any other planet, I'm team animal. So yeah, that's what I got. I'll shut up now. Not to stop the recording.
It was an accident by Jason M. Okun. Jason M. Okun, what did you think of this episode, and why did you pause the recording by accident just now?
No, rude.
Nothing happens by accident, and this episode doesn't happen by accident. Nothing does. We create everything, including our own luck. When it comes to this one, it's never been my favorite. It certainly has an interesting science fiction concept. Can't say it's too original, but it certainly holds your interest. And one thing I will say, and I think that colors my view of the episode for the most part, is I got to listen to it really with the headphones on. I usually don't do that, but I had no choice, and I was listening to it with the headphones on, and I think it's a great sounding episode. I absolutely love the score for it. And it's jumped out at me because I've watched some of the later series right afterwards, and you could hear sort of this wallpaper type music, especially in the later series. And this was more of a real score that had certain cues, frankly, that reminded me of the original series. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's subtle enough that you don't hear it if you just don't pay attention. So I think that colored quite a bit of it for me. I think visually, it's pretty decent as well. I think Robert Shearer did all he could with the set for the alien ship. I think there were a number of limitations there, but I think he shot it the best he could. But it looked a little hokey. There are some issues with the script and other things I'll mention later. But I think it's certainly an interesting episode. You can't call it one of the best for the third season because of how good the third season is. Again, I think it suffers by comparison. It's certainly passable, and when you do 26 a year, it's certainly a worthy entry. You can't, win them all, and I'll save the rest for later.
Wow, great stuff. I can't wait to find out about these limitations. There's something more there for sure. Thank you very much for that, Jason M. Okun. Faith Howell, what is up? How are you? So good to see a cool Star Trek shirt. What did you think of this episode?
Well, I'm going to be honest. I didn't have positive connotations with this one. I feel like it didn't speak to me. It's sort of along the lines of what Jason was saying. It just wasn't maybe a standout episode in the season. But rewatching it for this, since I have missed quite a number of the last few of these recordings, I wanted to make sure I had something good to say. I've watched it 4 times in the last 2 days, And it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And along with what Melissa was saying about, introversion, I got a lot of autism off of Tam Elbrun. And I mean, down to the way that they describe him as basically a savant. He's really, really good at reading people, but he is unpredictable. He says that children born with the ability to read early almost never live a normal life, but with early detection and intervention, they can have a better outcome. And that's almost exactly what I've heard about my children at every step of the way. And so I was like totally tuned into that piece. I did kind of like rail against the way everybody talked to him, like their Riker especially. And I understand they set up that, some of Riker's friends were killed because of supposed actions from this character, but it just didn't make a lot of sense. Like that seemed unnecessary to me, that piece. I also really, really liked the whole angle about looking for a place to fit in, because I feel like both from the autism perspective and just from a human perspective, that layer makes sense. And especially with this group, I wanted to pull in our chat pack friends as well, that I feel like that about this group, that I found a place to fit in with you guys. And so I thank you for that. And yeah, so
Great
I
stuff.
have a couple more things for left unsaid, but
whoa, we keep getting some good stuff to hang on to. All right. Thanks very much for that, Faith Howell. All right. Anil O. Polat is calling in all the way from Lithuania. I don't know, maybe somewhere. Where are you today, Anil? What do you think of this
not
one?
close. I like Jason just got off a flight, so I just flew from Thailand. So now I'm in the US. Yeah, so I'm here for 2 weeks. But
Awesome.
so I don't know what time it is, but yeah, this episode has a lot of like I feel like it has like 3 or 4 elements that could have been focused on as the full episode, like the whole Romulan plot, like why were they so interested in this? Just it's sort of like Lower Decks where they're just being evil to be evil, It's like, yeah, let's just go steal that thing. Or if they could have found Tin Man or boarded Tin Man earlier and then see like just to learn more about his connection with the ship and to understand, why it was so interesting and so powerful and what its motivations were, that might have been more kind of interesting. So I feel like there was a lot going on, but they didn't really focus on, at least for me. I think even the concept of being so telepathic that you can hear everybody's thoughts would drive you insane, and that could have been its own episode if it was, focused on a little bit differently. So I thought that was a pretty cool concept. And I do think everyone was kind of rude to him. I mean, I understand he's finishing your sentences before you even say anything, but I mean, you got to imagine he's hearing the entire ship's thoughts. Like that's probably pretty annoying. So, yeah, it's
Huh.
interesting enough, I think, but it maybe lacked a little bit of focus for me.
Good points. Great points. I mean, just because he was a little annoying to them, they can't like rise above and be like, well, clearly he's dealt with some mental illness since childhood. Let's be a little more patient with him. Maybe. Good point. Thank you very much, Anil O. Palat. Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear, has 2 actors behind her. One is Armin Shimmerman. The other one is
I never pronounce his last name right, but his first name is Harry. And
okay.
was this yeah, I think so. But I liked this episode before, but having rewatched Buffy the Vampire Slayer so many times, his character, the mayor, is probably one of the best villains that show probably ever had. Absolutely so fun. Unfortunately, the two of them didn't really have as many scenes together as personally I would have liked, but the few they had were good until he got eaten when the mayor became a demon, but that's beside the point. But I like this actor a lot, and his Star Trek character, I very much like. If you could hear everybody's thoughts, it would make you pretty darn grumpy too, I think. He's now used to it, so it hasn't driven him insane. And there actually is a Buffy episode where he ends up being able to hear people's thoughts, and it does start to do that. But sometimes it can, sometimes it can't. Tam is dealing with it, but then he finds where like you guys were, where he belongs, and he feels comfortable. It's nice and quiet. That's why he likes Data so much. Is there's nothing coming from Data, so he can take a deep breath around Data. And something I noticed in Data's quarters when Tam is walking around, that painting, that's the time vortex from the Times Squared episode. I love that image. I was very happy to see that when he pulls up the little cover. I loved Tam and Deanna. It was very nice to see her acting like being like the counselor role, and she was very gentle with him. Just absolutely great. At the end of the episode, that little hug between Deanna and Data just gives her the warm fuzzies, like that hug from behind. Kind of one of my favorite kinds of hugs, if I'm being honest. A couple of quick fun facts I found on Memory Alpha when I was looking up the episode. The chair that Tam sits in was created by reversing a time-lapse recording of a wax chair melting. I love those sort of effects, and it's very subtle. But the ambient sounds when they're walking around inside GOM2 were made by placing some kind of microphone or something on the abdomen of one of the sound guys to record the sounds his stomach made after eating pizza.
I know. I read that and I was like, ew, I'm not going to share that. It's gross.
Not the greatest sounds, but at the low level and behind the dialogue, I didn't mind it too much. I just found that fascinating. But for the limerick for the episode, it was actually inspired by the opening captain's log, where he's talking about, we're just doing this, normal, prep work kind of stuff for this thing, just came from even the flagship is not immune from the mundane. Okay, there we are. Not all missions can be so exciting. Routine is not as thrilling as fighting. While not as much fun, they too must be done, even though those tasks are not inviting. Yep.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Carrie Schwent, aka Crafty Bear. What is up, Chuck A in the cool prune juice and chill shirt? He's a TNG fanatic, by the way. What did you think of this episode, Chuck?
Well, I liked parts of it. It ran a little slow to me. It's not one of my favorites. I've seen TNG episodes for years and years, but I did like the opening bit with Captain DeSoto, because he had a mention and encounter at Farpoint, and Riker served with him before he went to the Enterprise. And then I did like the few scenes that Geordi, LeVar Burton were in. I think, trying to get the ship back, the power back and stuff. I thought LeVar did really well on that. And then, Data, Brent Spiner had a couple real nice scenes with Tam, and so did Deanna, having he was a patient of hers. The story itself was, like I said, a little slow. Somebody mentioned the Romulan connection. I don't know why they were so adamant about fighting the technology, and I guess they needed to have an adversary in the script. But like I said, it was a little slow for me, but it's not one of my worst TNG episodes. There's some that I just don't want to watch. They're that bad. But this was kind of, middle of the road for me. When it's on reruns, I will watch it, because like I said, I like aspects of it. But it ran just the story was a little slow. Didn't have really any B plot that I remember, other than the Tam and Deanna backstory, maybe. But overall, like I said, I'll watch the episode. It wasn't one of my favorites, though.
That seems to be the consensus today. Thanks very much, Chuck A. Until Allyson Leach-Heid tells us why this is a top 4 episode for her. What do you think of this one?
As a kid, I could not stand this one. But the older I got, the more I'm like, actually, I understand the story. I think as a little kid, I was just like, I don't get this. Why are we inside this thing that looks like we're walking through intestines? I'm like, I didn't get that as a kid. But, watching it, I watched it earlier today, and I'm like, oh, no, this is a story about finding where you belong. And we're all doing that. And this episode does that quite well. And I agree that the music in this episode is actually quite wonderful. I think it puts a lot of emotion into the story that helps because it is a slower story. So having the emotional music going on really does help it. Geordi is so much fun in this episode. I love his line, I'm doing the best I can, but shields won't help if that star explodes.
Mm-hmm.
True. You want engines for that. So I love it when he's sassy. I was sad we didn't get Sassy O'Brien. He said like a word and was there. Would have liked more O'Brien. And my favorite moment will go to Wil Wheaton in this episode. I've never noticed it before this watch today. But when Tin Man exploded the first Romulan ship, Wil Wheaton's face is great. His eyes get up. He's like, ooh, just in the background. I'm like, yes, that's amazing. And I want to give a shout out to the ensign who took over ops for Data. She has amazing cheekbones. I kept noticing them whenever they were showing her. I'm like, oh, look at those cheekbones. They're gorgeous. So, yeah. Fun little things I like. It's not my favorite. If it's on and I'm not paying attention, I'll leave it going. So.
Mm-hmm. We all noticed those cheekbones, Allyson. Trust me, we couldn't stop. Couldn't take my eyes off of those. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Allyson Leach-Heid. Chris McGee is here. What's up, Dark Lord? How are you today? And what did you think of this particular episode?
Well, I think I echo pretty much everyone else's thoughts that it wasn't really one of my favorites. It's not to say it was a bad episode, but kind of like Faith, I felt like there was just something missing. Maybe the script just hadn't fully cooked yet. Needed 1 or 2 more run-throughs before it should have gone to the show. I will mention the weird anecdote. Oddly, this particular episode was always missing back when I was collecting the episodes on VHS tape. Yes, I'm that old. So every time I went to go to the store to get the next episodes, I kept going back to see, had they got Tin Man in yet? No, they don't. I'm always missing that episode. So when I finally got them on DVD much later and I finally watched it, it was like a brand new episode for me. And I was mildly disappointed. That said, I do agree with Jason that the score is outstanding. This episode marks Jay Chataway's first time scoring music for the Next Generation. And my opinion, he knocks it out of the park. Some of the cues are almost worthy of a feature film, I think. Little side tangent. This isn't the first time we've seen a spaceborne creature on Next Generation, and won't be the last. Went down a small rabbit hole looking up the history of living ships in science fiction, and it does have a long history of shows that include a living ship. Babylon 5, Stargate Atlantis, and even the first episode of this show, Encounter at Farpoint, had essentially a living ship in it. Some shows like Farscape and Lex center their premise on a living ship. Even Doctor Who's TARDIS is considered alive. Also, I looked it up. I lied earlier. There are actually two some kind ofs in this episode.
Whoa.
LaForge, after seeing Tin Man on the screen for the first time, he says, looks like some kind of ship. And then O'Brien later on, after beaming Tam and Data over to Tin Man, says some kind of force field went up. So they couldn't beam them back. Finally, my memorable quote of the episode, I think it's the perfect one taken out of context, and that is, the more unusual the life form, the better he likes it.
Great stuff. Thanks very much,
Whoa.
Chris. And speaking of living ship, that scared the living ship out of me when you started that sentence. But all's well that ends well. Thanks, Melissa. Wow. Jake's final take. Cirroc Lofton, final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I just wanted to there was some moments there that I did think the guest star Harry Groner really did a good job. Particularly when he first saw Data and realized that there was somebody standing next to him that he couldn't read. That facial expression I thought sold well as an actor. I thought he really sold me on that, because it was kind of like this, like, whoa, who the hell is this guy? Like, why am I not getting a vibe over here? So I really loved his performance in that particular moment there. Also, I would say I would be remiss if I don't mention the fact that, which is an obvious fact that everybody knows, but it's still one that needs to be recorded for posterity for those that may not know. But Tin Man, I think, comes from the Wizard of Oz. And I believe that the Tin Man was looking for a heart. And in this case, I feel like the Tin Man could be several characters. The Tin Man could be the ship that needed a captain in it. The Tin Man could also be Data himself. And the Tin Man can also be Tam in this case as well, all of whom are kind of looking for a heart. And so that's kind of one of my big takeaways from watching this episode. Once again, I'm going to reiterate how much I love Data saying that he belongs on the Enterprise. This is where I belong. I love that moment. I thought it was just, magical for me, and kind of a realization for me. I felt like he was having an epiphany of some sort as himself, as his own character, like realizing his own sense of purpose or belonging. So those were some of the moments that I really enjoyed. And lastly, I will say, I want to credit Troy's ability as a Beta Z, because I've noticed now that from the Beta Zs that I've seen, they have a lot of difficulty controlling their powers in the respect to kind of socializing with other people, both from Troy's mom now and also this character Tam, having a little bit of difficulty socializing in a way that's not offensive. And I thought Tam, for example, when he says to Data, Mr. Data, I guess you're the brains. I thought that was rude to say in front of the captain sitting right here, like, and you're calling him the brains. I'm like, that's kind of a social faux pas, I would say. And obviously with Luoxana, she's all over the place and just throwing out however she feels sometimes. So, yeah, I want to credit Troy and her ability to be in control of herself as much as she is as a Betazoid, because she does have patience. She doesn't just run off and say everything that she thinks or feels, because obviously she thinks and feels a lot more than we're let on to know. And so she has a lot of self-control, and I want to just highlight that as well in this episode. So those are my big takeaways.
Excellent. Lots of good stuff there. Well, this was a fun episode to talk about. Kind of a mixed bag. I don't feel like anybody's terribly high or terribly low on it. We got a lot more to talk about. We will in Things Left Unsaid. But for everybody else that is not a patron or a supporter of the show, thanks for hanging out with us. Thank you to Chris McGee, Allyson Leach-Heid, Chuck A, Carrie Schwent, Anil O, Polat, Faith Howell, Jason M. Okun, Melissa Longo. For Melissa, myself, Cirroc, and Mr. Aaron Eisenberg, thank you all very much for joining us today. We really appreciate all of y'all, and we'll see you next time. And until then, always remember the seventh rule.